So welcome everyone, good afternoon. It's the third Thursday of May, so it means that it's time for the third CP webinar today on the topic of volunteers. My name is Mirka Jakashova and I work for CP as Policy Officer, and today with me it's my pleasure to introduce my dear colleague Anna Esquerra-Roqueta, working too as CP Policy Officer, and of course our dear guest speakers, Katrin Koller from Neustart, Austria, and Melinda from the Dutch Probation Service. We are excited to welcome you here and happy that you made time this afternoon to join us for this short session. As always, this webinar is being recorded, so if you cannot stay for the entire time, or those who could not attend today that you are aware of can then find the webinar on our YouTube channel. At this moment, you can already find there the first two webinars that took place in the recent months. The first one was on the topic of alternatives to detention, namely the Women's Problem-Solving Court, delivered by Fiona Deacon from His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, and the second one on the topic of violent extremism, namely strategies for working with radicalized individuals, delivered by Shuma Elger from the Violence Prevention Network in Germany. To start with some house rules, as always, we ask participants to join in with their full names or to change if they join this room with not their full name, to change it so that we see who is here. You are of course welcome to ask questions via a dedicated Q&A tool that you can find at the bottom of navigation panel as always, or your questions can be addressed after the meeting via a raise your hand tool, and you can ask the questions on your own. Of course, I keep saying questions, but we welcome not only questions, but we are happy to learn your experience, practice, to hear your comments, thoughts, opinions. About the third webinar, as I said, it's the third out of 5 webinars, and over the years, CEP has made efforts and contributed with its activities and actions to the work of volunteers in probation across Europe. Recently, we have been the leader for the Koller project. During the recent World Congress on Probation and Parole in the Netherlands, we've supported and promoted for organization of the Second World Congress for community volunteers supporting offenders reintegration, where a declaration to establish an annual volunteer day was signed. This topic will also be addressed during the workshop on working with communities and awareness raising in probation taking place in Prague. And of course, there is a dedicated section on the CEP website on the topic of volunteers, where you can find useful information and resources. But to this webinar, the two presentations we will listen to today are about volunteer probation service in Austria and then about the Koller project. First is the volunteer probation service in Austria presentation delivered by Katrin Koller from Neustart. Something short about Katrin: she's a social worker and has started working at Neustart back in 2012. She's been a department leader since 1917 and has 2 volunteer teams herself. One has led the 2 volunteer teams herself, one in the countryside and one in the city center. We are very happy to welcome you here, Katrin, today, and we are happy that you that you decided to join this meeting as the speaker. I will give you the floor. We can start the presentation, and then we are happy to listen to it. So,
thank you.
Just give me a second.
No worries.
Do all these necessary starts.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I gladly will talk about our volunteer probation service, because I think it's a really good one. And since I'm leading 2 volunteers myself, I can talk about the practice as well. But first, I want to talk about Neustart, just give you a short overview of what we're doing. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Is this the next slide? Maybe, yeah. I don't have it printed out. First of all, who are we talking to? Who are we talking about? Our volunteers are between age 25 and age 70. 70 might seem a bit high, but it works completely fine. They are allowed to take their last client at the age of 70, and once that client is reintegrated, rehabilitated, they're probably going into pension. We have people in my team that have been working as volunteers for 38 years already, so that's quite a long time, and I'm really proud of them. Who are we talking to? Talking about? We're talking about social workers, especially in the town. We are talking about teachers, nurses, anyone who wants to join and who has a social background or a background in the social field, or is a professional who can deal with apprenticeships and stuff like that, can become a social worker. We also have people who are in the military, we have insurance brokers, we have skilled traders. They are rare, and we are always looking forward to getting them into our teams, but they are there and they exist. But most is we recruit from the professional field, like social workers and so forth. But it's people from all areas of life with any type of background, with language skills, with age skills, with different nationalities. It's a wide variety of people who are joining us and becoming volunteers. Next slide, please. I must have mixed those two. My company, Neustart, works throughout Austria. So we have an institution in each of our counties, so it's 9 in total. We are mostly funded by the Ministry of Justice, but also by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And there's some regional governmental funds depending on the areas we're working in. Just to give you an overview, probation service is our biggest field, also with the Counseling Center for Violence Prevention. That's quite new. That's 2.5 years old. We also do afternoon care for people who are in jail, where we support them coming out and getting a good transition from the inside to the outside. We also have community service throughout Austria. A big field also is electronic monitoring and victim offender mediation. Our volunteers are only in the probation service though. So all of them do work in probation. Next slide, thank you. What is the big difference between us and most of the volunteer services other institutions offer? Our volunteers are equal to employees who are also probation officers or work in probation service. So that means they have the same responsibilities, they have the same rights, they have the same everything really. So they are completely equal. Obviously, the big difference is the caseload and the clients themselves. They are not as risky, obviously, as the ones that our main volunteers, our employees deal with. I am quite confused today. I'm so sorry. In total, throughout Austria, we have over 1,000 volunteers, which is quite a lot, considering we only have 750 professionals, employed professionals. So in each area, there's a few volunteer teams who deal with volunteer clients. Basically, what we do want is that each volunteer has at least a minimum of 3 clients. We have, in my area, started quite fresh with, I think, over 25 new volunteers who obviously don't have 3 clients yet, just 1. And the maximum is 5 clients. Those numbers are defined by law. So they can't go over 5. They can't have 6 clients. 5 is the maximum, which is good because they have the time and the energy for 5 clients to work with and counsel throughout a month. Some volunteers, or the average time now with all the new volunteers coming in, is 8.5 years. I have 2 volunteer teams where I think it's much higher. I have a lot of people who are either totally fresh or within their 20 years of volunteer service, which is quite a lot. There's a lot of experience with our volunteers in my teams. So you see, there's lots of employees, like 750, but even more volunteers. And since it's being regulated by law, it's not going to change, which is a good thing because 3 to 5 clients is quite a nice thing to handle if you're doing it on a volunteer basis, I think. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Neustart started as a volunteer company and turned into this big institution now. So we are quite used to having volunteers, and there's a high demand on working for us on a volunteer basis. For us, it's a lot of benefits, but also for the volunteers. We have obviously more people now to help and supervise with our clients. So the caseload on the employed probation workers is less due to the fact that most, under brackets, easier cases can be delegated to our volunteers. Also, since I have a regional team and I'm not coming from that region, I have people who work there, who live there, who grow up there, who know the social and regional resources way better than I do, because they know their neighbor, they know the mayor, they know the teachers locally, so they can access much easier and quicker the resources and networks that are there locally, and have ideas on how to support, for instance, a client who is trying to find work or is trying to find a flat, much easier because they have more a wider spread network where they can assist. And obviously, since they are local and we have a volunteer team in each local area, nearly each local one, there's also a huge network we can access as our for our employed probation workers. So we can use that both ways. We can try to get access through the volunteers if we need regional resources that we don't even know about. So that's a good point for our employed probation officers. Also, our employees obviously spread our work, our knowledge, our realistic view of criminality, but so do the volunteers. They are in groups and in circles, they are within neighbors, in the local communities, and they can give a realistic view if there's like a huge media attention towards a case that is completely portrayed wrongly. They can say, oh, hang on, these are the facts and this is fake news, for instance. So they can spread a realistic view throughout Austria. And being known in that area, they are believed, unless, of course, in comparison to somebody who just reads the news and has no idea what the news is talking about. There's like people, like neighbors, who they can talk to because they know they are volunteers and they have access to the real facts. So that's a big bonus point, that they are ambassadors for our values in the countryside and in their local circles. Also, we are trying, which is sometimes hard to get, we're trying to get volunteers who speak different languages and who come from different cultural backgrounds, because there is clients that don't speak the language and it's quite hard to work with translators. That just doesn't really properly work for counseling for a long period, like for 3 years. So if we have somebody who speaks, for instance, Romanian, or I don't know, any other language, and we have clients, we try to match them if that works, and then they can talk on a different level because it's in their mother tongue. That's a big benefit, and we're always looking for diversity in all areas. Also, which I have done recently a lot, we obviously, since we know our volunteers, we recruit our employees from the volunteers as well. So if there's any job opening on our employed area, not even in probation alone, but also in other areas, it obviously goes out to our volunteers. And if they are interested to join, they obviously can join, and we have a better understanding, and they have a better understanding already what our deal is, and how we are working and what standards we want, because they've already been with us, even on a volunteer basis. But it's easier to recruit amongst ourselves sometimes. The other thing also is that obviously with our volunteers, we get lots of attention from politicians and from the government, because our system works very well and is very far and widespread throughout the countryside. And which shouldn't be a big note, but obviously it's a cost reduction. With over 1,000 volunteers, with 5 clients each to the maximum, it reduces a lot of costs for our professional probation officers. Also, it frees them to deal with the really hardcore cases, because they have enough time to spend on the hardcore cases, so the easy ones can get counseling and supervision by our volunteers. So there's lots of benefits for us. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits for our volunteers again. That's, I think, on the next slide. Yeah. Since we have students, social work students, psychology students, law students, they obviously gain new skills working with us because they will get a good training and they will get lots of experience, including professional experience, and they can network amongst us and amongst the fellow team colleagues that are obviously also social workers. That's one of the big benefits for people wanting to join us on a volunteer basis. The other one is that they want to make an impact. They want to give something back to the community. Maybe they're working in the social services in an area, but maybe they want to spread out but not move jobs yet. So they do something on the side as a volunteer. Also, not to underestimate the personal development. We offer a lot of training, we offer a lot of support, we offer a lot of supervision, and obviously people change and people grow with us. So there's a lot of gain for the volunteers as well. They expand also their networks. They have better chances to become an employee. Since we know them, they know what they're in for if they want to apply for a job. And also, especially for students, each volunteer gets an expense allowance depending on how many clients they have and whether they have personal contact to the clients or not. That's a monthly thing. It's a nice side thing because obviously there are expenses. They go into town, they go into the countryside, they meet in cafes and bars, they buy coffees, they travel, they support the client with the coffee maybe. So that's the expense allowance as well. So they don't have to pay for anything that they buy or drink in a cafe or something. Yeah. Since I have two teams, one in the city and one in the countryside, I can say that there's completely different mindsets. And there's regional varieties. In some areas, we have a lot of teachers because there's a lot of schools. In some areas, we have more from the health services like nurses and health staff. But I think the variety is a nice mixture. Overall, we have a maximum of 12, maybe 13 volunteers per team. So the teams are quite big already, especially in my area where we've just filled them all up to 12 people because there's so many clients that need counseling. And we wanted to spread the load a bit more. And there's lots of people interested in becoming a volunteer. In my area, there's 2 team leaders per team. One is the main focus, one is the voice, I would say, and the other one is the colleague that supports and co-hosts. But there's 2 employed probation officers or probation workers that are team leaders and work together in one team. The teams are set up with monthly meetings, apart from the summer holidays, but monthly meetings, depending on how many team members there are, how many volunteers there are, 1.5 to 2 hours, once per month. That's mandatory, obviously, because it's quality control, where there's a mandatory case documentation. The case documentation is the same one as our employed probation services have. So there's no distinguish between employee and volunteer. It's completely the same one with the same rules, the same fields they have to fill out. Everything is the same. The contact frequency is also similar. Obviously, it's driven by the risks and the needs. If there's clients that need more and need more evaluation, more supervision, then it's not a client that will be supported by a volunteer, but by an employed person, employed probation officer. But obviously, the low risk and low need clients will be supervised by volunteers. And it depends, 1 meeting a month, maybe 1.5, maybe 2 meetings per month is the norm. But it depends on the needs of the client, so that can vary. The same standards, like I said, for both volunteers and employed ones, and the maximum of 5 clients, like I said before, by law. So that gives you an idea on how many clients, how much time the volunteers have to invest in the volunteer system. So if there's 5 clients, that's 5 to 6, 7 meetings all 5 clients included per month, including the documentation and including the team meeting. That's the time they have to invest if they want to join our volunteer system. I see there's 2 questions, maybe. Let me have a look. Oh, no, there isn't yet. Okay. So how do we make sure that our quality stays the same with our volunteers and our employed people? Through training, we have a mandatory training of 5 modules. Each module is 3 to 5 hours, depending on the intensity, depending on the region. It's all about the norms and the values of a probation officer, because obviously that's new to them. Also, the judicial system is new to them. So we take a detailed tour through the judicial system, through the background. The documentation is a big thing, and obviously our reports. Where and when and how do we have to report? Do we have to write reports? How do we deal with the court hearings? What do we wear? What do we say? Everything. The employees get, our volunteers get as well, but in a smaller amount. So it's the same system. It's mandatory. All of our employees have to, all of our volunteers have to go through that, as well as our employees. And it's a yearly update as well. So if there's any needs, like for instance, they want a special on drugs or on, I don't know, a lot of different things that's just happening regionally, they can suggest it, and we will try to get a vocational training for that area, for that topic as well. This year, for instance, we have a special on drugs because it's just needed and there was a demand for it. So we're trying to set it up in addition to the normal vocational training that everybody gets anyway. And our team leaders have an idea which volunteer needs what training and is supportive. And we are in a lot of contact to focus and manage the trainings as well, because obviously that's very important. We do have the same standards, so we have to make sure. Okay, somebody is asking that students can be volunteers. No, we don't. No, none of the students need master's degrees. We do have nurses as well who don't have any master degrees. So if you are at the age of 25, that's the minimum by law, you can apply. And if we think that you fit in, and if you agree to the basic training that there is, you can join. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be studying social work. You can studying anything if you want to join, and if you want to give something back to the people, you can join, and we will see if you fit in. Since we also have skilled workers as well, who aren't social workers either. I hope this answered the question of the age limit of 25. You're welcome. So since we have the teams that are once per month, how do we supervise it? How do we make sure that our volunteers do the same job as our employees? We have mandatory team meetings, like I said. If obviously due to the job, if somebody is not able to come, for instance, there's nurses and night shifts, they have to stay in contact with the team leaders, so we know what's going on with the clients. They have to document monthly due to the money they get paid. They have to, if they don't document, we'll call and we'll talk. If there's a computer problem, we try to solve it, obviously. And there's obviously counseling as well. So if they have a problem they haven't encountered before with the client, they can anytime call a team leader and we will try to support them. And we do case supervision. We try to bring it into the team so everybody in the team can learn from the experience, or maybe even have ideas on how to get a flat in that area. That's quite a good thing, especially in the countryside teams, because there's always somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who has a flat. It's quite astonishing, really, how it works. So our team leaders control and supervise and obviously support our volunteers. We are trying to assess new clients first as by our employed workers, who make sure who assess if the client is able to be supervised by a volunteer. Like there are certain offenses like sex offenses or high risk offenses that obviously are excluded, but there's lots of low risk offenses that are easily handled by volunteers. Teenagers, first crimes, for instance, easily handed over to volunteers. And then we try to make sure that there's enough volunteers who want to work with teenagers, for instance, and then we make sure that we make a good fit. And if that works, they'll meet the client, maybe under supervision, maybe in our offices for the first time, and then they are free to continue and counsel. Okay. Good. Apparently, I'm already finished. I have been a volunteer team leader, a team leader of volunteers for nearly 10 years, both teams, and I really enjoy it. It gives me so much pleasure to go in and meet all these new and long time and experienced volunteers. They offer so much experience and so many varieties that it's really a pleasure working with them and trying to sometimes they really fight over the cases because they completely want to take care of that one person, and I have to decide which one will get the person, the client. It's very nice. It's the good use of volunteers is the basis for our work, really. I think there's 2 more questions. Can you accept former probationers or former drug users to support your activity with positive stories? Like volunteers, we don't normally do that because most of the clients we deal with we don't want to see again, which is a good thing under brackets, because we don't want them to come back. And for our volunteers, that doesn't really work because it's quite a big thing. We have over 10 teams in my area, so that would be hardly organizable, and it's just not a thing we do. Besides, there's lots of volunteers who have 30 years of experience, who obviously had the 1 or 2 drug users as clients, and they have lots of experience as well to hand them down to the new people. That's the one question. The other one, the sustainability of our work through the probation officer. What kind of side effects has Facebook with volunteers? I don't know what you mean by that question. We use Facebook to recruit our volunteers, obviously, and there's a huge online presence from our company, and some volunteers use Facebook, some don't. I don't, for instance. I don't have Facebook, I don't use it, but it's not, we don't work with Facebook or social media. That's just no data protection or nothing. If that's the question you were asking. I'm not sure. Next question. Do you as a probation officer work in the field? I think about visits at offenders' homes. Yes, we do. It is actually mandatory to visit the home of every client at least once, possibly in the first half year of counseling, because it gives you a different experience. It shows us and the client that we're interested in him, and it shows how he or she lives. They can come into our office and talk about everything, but if we go home, we both appreciate their whereabouts and are interested in their lives, and also can support if we see the need. So yes, and our volunteers obviously have to go to their homes as well, but we make sure that there's a security checkup first, as in they know where they're going, they know where they're going, when they're going. If somebody else is at home, for instance, they know the client, so it's not advised at all to go in there for the first meetup ever. We make sure that the risk is as low as possible for our volunteers. If that answered your question, I think it did. Okay.
Okay, Katrin, thank you very much for this very comprehensive and great presentation. And thank you, of course, for answering the questions live.
Thank you.
I can see that, yes, I can see that we have all questions answered. So now to move on to our second presentation. As I said, the second presentation will be about COPPER, which is an acronym for the Cooperation to Promote a European Volunteering Program in Probation Services. The presentation will be delivered by Melinda from the Probation Service of the Netherlands, like Reclassering Netherlands. And something short about Melinda. Melinda is educated in social work and has been working at the Dutch Probation Service since 2007. She currently works as a regional coordinator at the International Office and participates in international projects, including the Koller project. And subjects that have her special interests are, among others, volunteer policy and training of volunteers. And it's not a coincidence that we are presenting this project here, because not only us, but also the Dutch Probation Service and other 5 partner organizations are the main partner organizations behind this project. So Melinda will tell you more about this project. Once again, thank you, Melinda, also for being with us. I will start sharing your presentation, and the floor on that is yours.
Thank you, Mirka. Well, as you said in the introduction, me and my colleague, Marco Brok, and we participate in the Koller project. And the Koller project started in December 22, and it will run until about the end of 25. And on the first sheet down below, you see the organizations and countries that participate in the project. And the CEP is in the lead of this project. So, as you said, the aim of the project is to promote volunteering with probation clients in European probation practices. And we do this through developing educational material that can be used by probational services and by community-based organizations that are working or want to work with probation clients. So if you want to go to the next sheet, Mirka. So these are the people who are participating in the project with the CEP in the lead: Portugal, Ireland, and Romania. So at first, the project started out with an evidence review conducted by the University of Cork. And the research has mapped out different European practices of volunteering in probation and identifying good practices from other jurisdictions. We also, the evidence review was also done by Neustart, and we saw that their practice was really good. And based on the findings, there was a peer review done by over 30 experts and practitioners, and so a shared vision of volunteering emerged. And some key elements are shown on the next sheet. So one of the key elements is that volunteering strengthens the rehabilitation and reintegration. We call this social inclusion of our clients. And we say it impacts also the community. Through volunteering, the community supports and welcomes the clients back into their fold. And this is something that Katrina also said. She said when volunteers are based locally, they know their environment, they know the way around, so they can help the clients much better. So, and the third key element is that we say volunteering is complementary to the role of the probation. So we say it leaves risk management to the professional, and the volunteer is there for their social support, for their social inclusion. So the evidence review product that was done by the University of Cork can be found on the Koller web. Yes, can you slip it to the next sheet, please? So at first, we designed a competency framework for the volunteers in probation. So we identified 11 competencies, and we divided these in 3 clusters. So the first one was attitude and qualities. So we would say, okay, how should a volunteer position himself? For example, he should be reliable. The second one is knowledge. So what should the volunteer know? For example, he should know everything about the professional field. And the third one is the skills. So how should the volunteer act? For example, he needs to have communication skills. And based on these competences, we are now designing a training. So the training consists out of 5 modules, and we've defined them in different themes. So one is the knowledge of the professional fields. For example, you need to know about the development of criminal behavior, the role and tasks of the volunteer and the probation officer. So the second one is relational skills. So how are you interacting with the clients? And we call this a working alliance. You need to have a fundamental base on working with the clients. And how are you getting this fundamental base? So we give all kinds of training about that. So what are your attitudes, fundamental attitudes? The third module is about the communication skills. So we will talk about verbal and non-verbal communication, about active listening, etc. The fourth one is observe and interpret. So we will talk about subjectivity, objectivity, and that we all have biases and how should you act when you are biased. So, and the fifth module is about the problem-solving ability. So it's about identifying problems by using live areas. This is something that we do in the Dutch Probation Service, and we will focus on problem and solution-orientated questions. So the whole training is in developing right now, and it's partly online. So we are developing an e-learning, but it's also partly physical. We are aiming on a one-day training on location. And on this physical day, we have exercises and discussions to process the theory. And next to this training, we are making a volunteer management handbook. And that consists out of recommendation for increasing interagency across volunteering and probation. We talk about how to recruit, train, manage, and value volunteers. And we have guidelines for collaborations between probation and community-based organizations and volunteers. Next sheet. So we say working with volunteers has many challenges, but also many rewards. We would like to single out one theme that we see in our work practice in the international office and also in designing the training. So the complex work practices requires well-equipped volunteers. So education and training is therefore needed, but it's also fun. It motivates volunteers. But volunteers have something different to offer than professionals. And we see that the biggest possession that a volunteer has is that he or she is really present to the clients. He's really there. He's connecting and attuning to the clients, putting the client's perspective first and taking care of a well relationship. And this attitude really comes natural to the person who wants to be a volunteer. Because, yeah, this is the reason why they want to be a volunteer. And what we see in our professional field is that we want to professionalize the volunteers too much. But I think it's really good to understand that we really need to preserve the initial motivation for the volunteer when they start working with volunteers. It's that they want to be present and near. So in composing the training, one of the main dilemmas is how far should we go in training the volunteers? Should we train them a lot about professional concepts and methods? But we say no, let's keep the professional thinking to the professionals and let's keep it simple for this training. But it's a challenge to find a good balance between the professionalization of volunteers and their specific individual talents. So I addressed the dilemma that we always want to make professionals out of them. So what would help address this dilemma? So we think that the role and tasks are very important. So how far do you want to go depends on the role and tasks of the volunteer in probation. In the vision of the Koller project, the role of volunteers is supporting the community building aspect, so the social inclusion. The volunteer provides social support. He will accompany the clients and give guidance and practical support, but he will not have a role, not an active role in risk management. I think that Katrin also stated this out in Austria. So the high-risk clients are done by the professionals and the low-risk clients are done by volunteers. So this is something that the Koller project is also aiming for. So this makes that we choose to give general information about the probation field and focus much more on the relationship, so the working alliance, and the basic attitudes, the skills needed to build this relationship. Another big tip is the motivation and talent. So we have to be aware of the motivation, strengths, wishes, and preferences of our volunteers. And does this fit the role and the task that they are going to fulfill as a volunteer? So therefore we need to be careful with professional concepts. So we have to make use of the professional concepts and methods, but we have to be careful. We have to restrain them and trim them down so that they fit the volunteer. So in our own probation service, the international desk, we also work with volunteers. And at one point we started learning the volunteers about motivational interviewing. But this is a really extensive technique that's really difficult. And we were debating if this is the right form for our volunteers. So we now really shift to this, shift away from this interviewing technique, because we think this is something for the professional. We really have to keep it simple for our volunteers. So we came back from this. So in our training, we still need the basic attitude that's needed for motivational interviewing, but we skip the difficult concepts like discrepancy and etc. So it's focused less on behavioral change. And Marco, he wrote an article about the dilemma of working with volunteers, and I think it's also you can also find it on the Koller website. So this is my brief overview about the Koller project. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Melinda, for this presentation. Yes, we have one question in the Q&A, but I can see that Anna is already answering the question because it's not directly related to the to the project. There are no other questions from participants. I would like to thank you both for being with us, and of course all our participants to be with us today. As I said in the beginning, this webinar has been recorded, so you will find it soon on our YouTube channel. The presentation will also be published on the CEP website. And the next session, the next webinar, the fourth one on the topic of technology, is to take place on the 19th of September. Last but not least, you will get a short email from me asking you to fill in the EU survey. We would like to ask you to take a couple of minutes and to answer the questions from the survey and help us then track on the quality and effect this event has had on you. Thank you very much once again for being with us. Have a lovely afternoon and see you next time.